Fellas, in the last 10 years, the UFC belt has changed hands multiple times, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be matching up current UFC champions versus the champion 10 years ago in every weight class. There's a couple champions from 10 years ago that beat current champs, and obviously the opposite, current champions, there's a few that beats the champion 10 years ago, and I am aware that current champions definitely have more skill and are more up to date with MMA than the champions 10 years ago, so I will be taking that into account, but please let me know if you agree with these takes or if you have any takes of your own or how you would predict these fights yourself. But we're going to stop waffling. We're going in there with the heavyweight division, which is Jon Jones versus Cain Velasquez. Cain Velasquez was a dangerous fighter in this time. I'd say slightly past his prime, but this was when Cain Velasquez was definitely a dangerous fighter. He was a threat on the feet. And Cain Velasquez, for me, he's definitely one of the best heavyweights of all time. I'd put him in my top 5 best heavyweights of all time. Top 20 greatest of all time, full stop, actually. So Cain Velasquez, big threat to Jones, but I still feel like Jones will be able to put him out there within 5. And by the way, this is current Jones, if I haven't made that clear. This is heavyweight Jones, the fat Jones, not the Jones back in early 2000s that were beating that. This is current Jones. So it's not prime Jones, but I still think Jones would definitely be able to take Cain Velasquez out there within 5. The best fight that I can kind of compare it to is the Shogun route, as in Jones would have to beat him on the feet and get respect early, maybe mix it up with some ground and pound and then eventually look for a submission, because like I said, Cain Velasquez was a threat on the feet, and I know Jones has faced many strikers in his time, so he'd have to take a grappling route for this fight, but it wouldn't be easy for Jones. This was a dangerous fight for Jones, especially current Jones as well. It wouldn't be like a Cyril Gane where he takes him down immediately and submits him, but he'd definitely finish him within 5. Cain Velasquez did have a lot of flaws that kind of got exposed later in his career, but in 2013, it was a very solid version of Cain Velasquez, but he's going against Jon Jones here. You can't bet against Jon Jones no matter what. Even if it was Jon Jones versus 10 Francis Ngannou's, Jones would find a way to win. Current Jones versus Cain Velasquez, final prediction, I'm going with current Jones. He'd finish him within 5, and I'm going to go by submission. He's definitely not finishing him on the feet, unless he was to like oblique kick Cain Velasquez to the point where his leg snaps in half. He'd have to finish him with ground and pound or submission or something like that, because like I said about 50 times already, Cain Velasquez was a real threat on the feet. But either way, Jon Jones by finish within 5 rounds, most likely submission or ground and pound, but it wouldn't be easy. Light heavyweight division, we've still got Jon Jones because he was the champion 10 years ago. That's what makes Jon Jones so incredible, man. Champion 10 years ago and he's still champion today. And he's going to be up against Jamal Hill. And by the way, I know Jamal Hill isn't actually a champion now. The belt is vacant in the light heavyweight division, but since he's the most recent champion, I'm going to be counting him as the champ, because I'm not going to completely miss out the division. But prime Jon Jones would maul him. This isn't the fat heavyweight that I was talking about against Cain Velasquez. This is early 2000s, juice to the gills, prime Jon Jones against Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill would be lucky to make it out round 1, honestly. Now, I'm not saying that Jamal Hill would have absolutely no success anywhere. Obviously, he's a fluid striker. He's got what it takes to win, but it took him 5 rounds to beat Glover Teixeira at his age. And I'm not trying to diss Glover Teixeira. I know he beat Jan Blachowicz in a very good way. You know, he had a scrap with Yuri Prohaska, so I'm not here to diss Glover Teixeira, but if it takes you 5 rounds to get a decision win over Glover Teixeira, what makes you think you're going to be beating Jon Jones, the greatest of all time in his prime? I don't want to spend too long on this one because it's obvious how the matchup goes. Jones would definitely take him down and submit him or ground and pound him within 2 rounds, kind of like Cain Velasquez fight, because Jamal Hill would probably... But even then, I still think that Jones would be able to beat him on the feet. I think he'd be able to, like I said, shatter him with those oblique kicks and use his range effectively, because Jamal Hill, as good as he is, he's nowhere near Jon Jones' level, and I haven't said enough from Jamal Hill to say that he beats Jon Jones or even comes close to lasting against Jon Jones. His best win, what is it, the Johnny Walker knockout and the Glover Teixeira win? Is that the wins that we're talking about here? So 100% Jon Jones is winning this fight within 2 rounds. It's not even close. It would be a mauling. I've compared it to the OSP fight before. I think that's a good comparison between them two, Jones versus OSP, but Jamal Hill, as good as he is at light heavyweight, and I'm not saying he won't be champion again, but when it comes to prime Jon Jones, I don't think I can pick any current light heavyweight over him. So I'm going with Jon Jones with submission or ground and pound in 2 rounds. Middleweight division, Sean Strickland versus Chris Weidman. Now this is a weird one because it feels really weird to say that Sean Strickland's the champion. I'm so used to saying Adesanya for these ones, but Sean Strickland versus Chris Weidman. And this was prime Chris Weidman, by the way. This is prime Sean Strickland, the one that's just demolished Adesanya, the one that's just demolished Abbas Magomedov. And when was his last loss? Was it a Jared Cannonier robbery when he should have won that fight anyway? So prime, Sean Strickland is definitely in his prime right now. Chris Weidman back in 2013 was also in his prime. He was getting a lot of wins, but to beat Strickland, Weidman would have to mix it up with grappling and striking. He couldn't just take a striking approach against Strickland because Strickland would jab his head off. So he'd have to mix it up with grappling. He has no choice. I mean, maybe he'd have a choice because I heard a lot of people saying that if Strickland didn't mix it up with grappling against Adesanya, he wouldn't win, and he did. But at the same time, Weidman is not the same striker as Strickland. But he would have a decent chance with Weidman. This was definitely a close fight. Prime Weidman versus Prime Strickland. Weidman would definitely have a decent chance at catching Strickland. But to win this fight, without a doubt, he'd have to mix it up. And Strickland's game plan would have to be keep it on the feet and walk forward and pray. The new Strickland, the evolved Strickland that's been training with Alex Pereira. Yeah, I'm going with Strickland by decision. I don't think he'd be able to finish Chris Weidman, especially in his prime. Because Chris Weidman, I mean, when was Strickland's last finish? Was it Abbas Magomedov 2 fights ago? I mean, Chris Weidman is nowhere near on the level of Abbas Magomedov. It would be a 100% a tough fight for Strickland, but Chris Weidman, I think he's outdated. I think the middleweight division has been outdated since then. I've got Strickland winning this. 100%. Yeah, I got Strickland winning this by decision. Close fight. I'm not saying Strickland absolutely mauls in. I'm not saying that he'd batter him like he did against Adesanya. I'm just saying I think Strickland will be able to take it to a decision, but Weidman's game plan would have to require more grappling and mixing up with striking, whereas Strickland's would literally just be pure walk forward and pray for the best. So I'm going with Strickland to win this one. Welterweight division, GSP versus Leon Edwards. Now, we ignore the fact that GSP's PNG is super pixelated. The UFC haven't updated it, which obviously no surprise they haven't done it. He hasn't fought since 2016, but Leon Edwards versus GSP. It's got to be GSP by decision for me. I'm going to say decision because you've got to remember this was in 2013. This was when GSP was starting to slow down. It was approaching the time when he had the fight with Johnny Hendricks where he lost that fight. I mean, this was Johnny Hendricks when he was juiced to the gills. You can make it any excuses as you want, but he did lose the fight against Johnny Hendricks. So this is definitely when he was starting to slow down. And he's matched up against current Leon Edwards. Now, I haven't seen enough from Leon Edwards to say that he beats GSP. I mean, he had 2 impressive wins over Kamaru Usman, which are definitely impressive because he beat the guy that nobody else in the welterweight division could beat. He beat the second greatest welterweight of all time. He beat the guy who was nearly overtaking Anderson Silva's record, but still, I haven't seen enough from him. I need to see more. Who else is he beating? Vicente Luque, Nate Diaz, where Nate Diaz nearly finished him in the 5th round. Brian Barberena, where Brian Barberena nearly finished him. I haven't seen enough from Leon Edwards, unfortunately. I haven't seen enough from him. Maybe if he racks up a couple more wins, but we're comparing him to GSP, the greatest of all time. Well, maybe not the greatest, but top 5 greatest of all time here. Leon's game plan would 100% be defend takedowns, keep it on the feet, which is a very similar game plan to the one they had against Kamaru Usman, but I feel like GSP has way more ways to win than Kamaru Usman did, whereas I feel like Kamaru Usman, his game plan was always to try and survive on the feet and then go for a takedown when he could. Whereas I feel like GSP, he could definitely survive on, not just survive, I think he could actually have success on the feet. GSP, he's very well-rounded. One of the most well-rounded fighters in the UFC. He could definitely take Leon on the feet. Maybe not take, I'm not saying he would beat Leon Edwards on the feet. I'm not saying that he'd absolutely dominate Leon Edwards on the feet, but I think he could definitely have success on the feet compared to what Kamaru Usman did. And then when it comes to grappling, GSP is unfortunately a way higher grappler, way higher level grappler than Leon Edwards is. So GSP has more ways to win. Maybe if Leon Edwards goes out there and absolutely demolishes Colby and beats another contender like, I don't know, Bilal Muhammad or Shavkat, maybe then my opinion would change. But GSP just has way too many ways to win. He might have slowed down in this time, and he might have not been the best he ever was, but we're talking about GSP here. He'd find a way to win, so I'm going with GSP by close decision win, because Leon Edwards, you've got to give him his respect. He's a very good striker. He's got good takedown defense, but I'm going with GSP by decision here. I don't think either of them finish each other. Even if Leon Edwards was to win, I don't think he'd finish GSP because Leon Edwards doesn't really tend to finish fights. I mean, I know he finished Kamaru Usman with a head kick, but Yeah, I'm going with GSP by decision. Lightweight division. Islam Makhachev versus Anthony Pettis. This kind of reminds me of the Khabib versus Poirier fight. Islam dominates for most of the fight and then eventually he'd get a finish, but I do think there'd be times where Anthony Pettis would be able to kind of rock Islam. I know that there was times when Poirier was able to have slight success on the feet against Khabib, so I think Pettis would definitely be able to do the same against Islam Makhachev. It would be very similar to Poirier versus Khabib, but I say if Khabib had better striking, because Islam is a better striker than Khabib. As much as you can argue who's better between the two, when it comes to striking on the feet, I've definitely seen a lot more against Islam. Obviously, we saw him against Volkanovski on the feet. We've seen him against Oliveira on the feet. He did look very impressive on the feet, to say that he's one of these, just like, people just kind of label him as a wrestler. I wouldn't be surprised if Islam could beat a lot of these top 10 people in lightweight on the feet, to be honest with you. How many times have I said on the feet in this video, man? Anyway, Islam would finish him within 4 rounds by submission, because it's Islam Makhachev. He's the best wrestler in the UFC right now. Anthony Pettis, he had some good submissions, by the way. I'm not saying Anthony Pettis is useless on the ground. Anthony Pettis has got legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and as well as that, he's a pretty decent boxer, which is why he was champion, but that's just not enough to face current Islam Makhachev. 10 years ago, a lot has gone by. The caliber of opponents, unfortunately, as much as we can respect Anthony Pettis, his caliber of opponents was nowhere near Islam Makhachev. Islam Makhachev's had beaten some tough people as well. I mean, he's coming off a win over Alexander Volkanovski and Charles Oliveira, and he's about to face Oliveira again. Yeah, Pettis could have some boxing threat. He could maybe, rock Islam on the feet a couple of times. Maybe he'd be able to get a submission attempt on him, but apart from that, I think it would be total domination from Islam Makhachev. So I'm going Islam Makhachev by submission within 4 rounds. Maybe ground and pound as well, but nah, I'd go submission. Then we go featherweight. Alexander Volkanovski versus Aldo. Now, we have seen this fight before, and Volkanovski did win the fight for 5 rounds. No, it was a 3-round fight, I think, actually. And by the way, I know that Aldo was a lot better in 2013 than when they faced before, but I've still got Volk beating him. The skill level, and I said this in the intro, the skill level between two fighters has changed so much in the last 10 years. I think Volkanovski's way too well-rounded for Jose Aldo. I just think he is. I think he'd definitely win by decision. And by the way, this is 2013 Aldo we're talking about. So Volk's not going to go out there and finish him. This isn't no Yair Rodriguez. This is prime Aldo, arguably the greatest featherweight of all time. It's a big debate right now in MMA who's better between the two of them in the featherweight division. But when it comes to fighting each other, prime Aldo versus current Volkanovski, I'm going with Volkanovski. Really tough fight for him. Probably the toughest fight he's had besides Islam Makhachev. And probably the toughest featherweight fight ever, to be honest. It is literally the best versus the best in the division. It's like if you were to get the two people who are at the top, like the greatest featherweight versus the greatest featherweight, and match them up against each other, this is what you get. I'm still going Volkanovski though. 2013 Aldo, 100%, like I said, will be a more difficult Aldo for Volk to face than the one that Volk faced before. But I've got Volk just catch. I've got Volk teeing off on him on the feet. Maybe Aldo would be able to rock Volk. Maybe he'll be able to catch Volk, but Volk's just got too many ways to win this for me, so I'm going with Volk by decision. I think it'd be a high technical fight. I don't think it'd be a scrap. I think it'd be a very high level technical fight. Maybe in the later rounds we'd see some urgency from Jose Aldo, but Volk's too good, man. He's too good. He's got too many ways to win. He could even mix it up with wrestling if he wants to, because Volkanovski's actually got some solid wrestling. Underrated wrestling as well. I mean, he showed that he can actually grapple against Islam, but I'm going with Volk by decision. Bantamweight. This is a really weird matchup. We've got Barao versus O'Malley. Now, 2013 Barao, 100% a really, really tough fight for Sean O'Malley. I actually think Barao could pull off a finish here. But if it goes to the distance, I'm going with Sean O'Malley. I've gone with Sean O'Malley. He's got the range against him, man. We've seen, and I can't count out O'Malley anymore. The way that he beat, after the Peter Yan fight, it gives me much confidence against Sean O'Malley. And obviously he had the Aljo fight where he slept Aljo. But when I watched him against Peter Yan, it gave me, you can call it a robbery, but it gave me a lot of hope for O'Malley in the sense that he could beat a lot of these guys 10 years ago in the bantamweight division. And at the same time, it comes into question, who did Barao actually beat? Like, we've got O'Malley who's got a win over Aljo and Peter Yan. You've got to give him respect for that. Whereas you look at Barao's record and who is he actually beaten? I don't think his caliber of opponents compares to someone like Sean O'Malley. It could go either way though, because Barao was very dangerous in the bantamweight division in 2013, but I'd side with O'Malley. He's got better caliber opponents. He's got the advantages on the feet. It could go either way. He hits hard. They both hit hard, to be honest with you. Close fight, but I'm going with O'Malley. I'm gonna have to go with O'Malley, unfortunately. If Barao finished Dillashaw, maybe then I'd probably edge towards Barao. But when it comes to you look at, like I said this before, when you look at the opponents that they had, Sean O'Malley's opponent's caliber was way better than what Barao had. I mean, who was the best person that Barao beat? When you really take it into question, what are we talking about? Uriah Faber, the 50-year-old retired skateboarder? Who actually was it that he beat? So yeah, I'm going with Sean O'Malley to win this by decision, but it would be a very close fight because Barao was a killer back in the day. Had a massive downfall though. That was his problem. He had a massive downfall. And then finally, the flyweight division, Alejandro Pantoja versus Demetrius Johnson. I actually really want to see this fight. I really wish we would have seen this fight because Pantoja, I think stylistically, he's a difficult fight for Demetrius Johnson. He's got some legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he also hits hard on the feet. Johnson would have to mix up the striking and grappling. And I've said this about multiple fighters here, but he has no choice. On the feet, I think it's too risky to just stand and bang with a guy like Pantoja, who first of all has high pressure and hits like a truck. So Demetrius Johnson would have to gain respect on the feet early and then mix it up with grappling, kind of how Jones would have to do against someone like Cain Velasquez. But Pantoja, like I said, has a tough fight for Johnson. His path for victory would be trying to catch him on the feet, and if he can't do that, maybe try and submit Demetrius Johnson, but you're not submitting Demetrius Johnson. I think in the first couple of rounds, I could definitely see Pantoja having success, and then when it goes to rounds 3, 4, and 5, the experience would come into factor, and Demetrius Johnson, in my opinion, would get a finish by submission over Pantoja. Yeah, he managed to submit Pantoja. As good as Pantoja's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, he's facing Demetrius Johnson, the greatest flyweight of all time, top 3 greatest fighters of all time here. Johnson could take it to a decision though, because I understand, like I said, Pantoja, stylistically, he's a difficult fight for Johnson, but I'm going with Johnson by either submission or decision. Tough fight for him, and I really want to see this fight. Pantoja has a small chance of catching him, but Demetrius Johnson was too fast, too fluid back in the day. I've seen a lot of holes in Pantoja's games. I mean, he arguably lost the fight to Brandon Moreno. I'm not saying he did. I actually think Pantoja won the fight, but he had a very, very close fight against Moreno, who's basically just a boxer who a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whereas when it's Demetrius Johnson, I think there's levels to this. I've got Demetrius Johnson by submission or decision, and that is how I think UFC champions now would fare against champions 10 years ago. Please let me know your thoughts on this, and yeah, thank you for watching.